Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. In the past decade or so, Taiwan's economy has entered into a very important period of transition. In this process of globalization, Taiwan's future economic prospects has been full of challenges as well as opportunities. So how is Taiwan adjusting itself to this process of globalization? And these are the topics we are hoping to talk about today. In today's program, we are very honored and very delighted to have a very famous economist to come to our program. Professor Peter Chow is the professor of economics at the City University of New York, and he is also a consultant to the World Bank. Professor Chow, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this program.
So could you tell us what are the major impacts of globalization on Taiwan's economy?
I think the economy in Taiwan has been liberalized since the mid-1980s with a gradual liberalization on many of the labor market and the financial market.
Yeah.
But the major drive of the globalization, start with 1990s. And I think this is inconsistent with the irregular run of the trade negotiations.
That's right. But the thing is, in this process of liberalization, some sectors are not competitive enough to compete with the outside, industry. So they had to be moved out of the country and relocated in other areas. How is Taiwan adjusting in this process?
I think Taiwan has been doing relatively well by comparison to other developing countries. Mainly it's because Taiwan's economy is highly opened. And after the drive of the globalization, Taiwan pursued mainly, number one, the privatization of some of the state-owned enterprise. Number two, the trade liberalization, including the commodity as well as the financial sector. And number three is the deregulation of the foreign direct investment.
That's right. But in terms of the so-called liberalization of the financial sector, some critics have said that Taiwan has not done enough in liberalizing our financial sector. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, financial sector is relatively backward, relative to the real sector. So it is true that Taiwan has to adopt a gradualism rather than a dramatic, liberalization, which may have a more severe impact, as we have observed in 1997, the financial crisis in Thailand, in Korea, and some other Asian country. Just because Taiwan take the gradual step, so Taiwan can avoid this kind of financial storms.
Yeah, but as we have noticed that in this process of expanding our financial sector, there are many mergers of different banks and so on, local banks and also as well as international banks. But in the process, there are some controversies surrounding those mergers. What's your comment? What's your take on that?
I think, it is true that after, the financial sector opened to the rest of the world, Taiwan's financial sector has become more competitive internationally.
Yeah.
Therefore, there are some merge and acquisitions. And I think the controversy issue involved, number one, is the employee of the previous, government-owned bank. Their benefit or their retirement pension plan may be affected a little bit after the privatization. And number two is who is going to take over which one.
That's right.
Yeah. In other words, it's a winner take all, but the judgment of the competitiveness sometimes is a little bit controversial.
That's right. And how about the deregulation? For instance, in terms of foreign capitals coming to Taiwan, are we now opening up all the sectors to foreign capitals?
Yes, we did pick up some of the sector which is much more competitive and open much more liberally than the others. And first of all, for example, in the stock market, we decided to have the so-called QFII, qualified foreign institutional investors, to penetrate into our domestic market. But we mean the Taiwan government adopt gradualism by gradually lift the ceiling of the foreign investment.
I think a very important milestone in Taiwan, in terms of Taiwan's economic development, is Taiwan's accession to the WTO in the year 2002. So looking back, how has Taiwan been doing after that?
Well, because Taiwan has tried to get into the WTO for more than 10 years. So therefore, all the preparatory step has been well undertaken. After, at the time, Taiwan, I think, joined in WTO in January 2002.
That's right.
But it takes about 10 years for Taiwan to get into the WTO. So within these 10 years, before January 2002, all most of those sectors are well prepared for this challenge.
Yeah. How about our agricultural sector? Because there are concerns about that. Our agricultural sectors may not be competitive enough in the face of these foreign challenges.
Agricultural sector is always the most controversial issue. Mainly it's because it's highly protected in all countries, developed or developing countries. Even today, in Europe and in the United States, they still have much of the controversy in terms of how to protect their farmers at the same time to open to the global market. I think, by comparison to the degree of protection, Taiwanese government, did help the farmers. At the same time, they try to make it compatible with the global standard.
Okay. I think Taiwan has been facing challenges from other regional countries, including Southeast Asian countries, China as well. And what do you think Taiwan has been doing?
Well, of course, because of the political factors that Taiwan could not, sign any of the free trade agreement with many of those Southeast Asian countries, which Taiwan has a strong morale to join in. However, even that Taiwan was blocked from signing those free trade agreement with the Southeast Asian country, Taiwan has been a de facto partnership in many of those countries' economy. So therefore, the real impact of the regional economic integration on Taiwan's economy could be minimized.
But the thing is, there are concerns about the so-called marginalization of Taiwan in this regional integration. We've been seeing the so-called 10+1, 10+3 integration process, but Taiwan has been left out. So what do you think about that?
I really don't think that Taiwan has been marginalized because of the East or Southeast Asia's economic integration. Mainly because Taiwan has been actively making foreign direct investment in those countries. And in trade theory, we can adopt the so-called tariff jumping strategy. That is, they can discriminate against Taiwan's trade, but they won't discriminate, and they could not discriminate against Taiwan's investment and the technological flow. And the strategy is similar, was adopted by Japanese automobile industry. I'm sure many of our audience still recall that in the 1980s, the Japanese automobile industry faced a very, very severe, restrictions from U.S. But how come Toyota companies today still become number 2 and jumping to be number 1? Mainly it's because the Toyota company was able to adopt the so-called tariff jumping strategy by disassemble their final product into the so-called fragmentation of the production process. And so not only that the Japanese export can survive, but even accumulate much more foreign exchange reserve. So my question here is, if Japan can, why cannot Taiwan?
But something that people are concerned about is the capital flow. In the past, some people say that we are capital gain countries, but now we are in the process of a capital drain. Do you think that's the case?
Well, let me put it this way. Okay, this is a very interesting and a very controversial issue. But the capital is highly mobile.
That's right.
So therefore, wherever that the investor can find the highest rate of return, the capital will go there. But I think in terms of the domestic industry and in the domestic economy, as far as that the home base for those companies, for those investors that stay in Taiwan, it does not matter that where they make an investment, as far as their profit can be sent back home as a remittance. I think the only problem is for Taiwan's foreign direct investment is too much concentration in owning one particular area. And that unfortunately happened to be politically hostile to Taiwan.
But another issue that people point out is that there are some restrictions over the inflow of money from China. So that has blocked some of the money that can be wired back to Taiwan. Do you think that's correct?
I have to look much more closely rather than to say yes, because in terms of the capital flow, Taiwan, the central bank has highly liberalized that. I think it's not the restriction of the capital inflow back from China, but rather is the suspicious of the Taiwanese businessmen for being tax penalty. So somehow the income tax law has to be revise and to make it compatible.
And how about technology innovation in Taiwan? Because I think it's very important for Taiwan to upgrade its industry and upgrade its economy. Because other countries or competitors will be having the know-how sooner or later. So how has Taiwan been doing in terms of upgrading our technologies?
I think Taiwan has been relatively well in terms of the upgrading of the technology. Number one, we can see there's a significant, large investment, in terms of research and development as a percentage of GDP. Back in the 80s, that percentage is only about 1%. Today, we almost reach about 2.5, 2.6% of GDP. So, which is a very remarkable progress. And number two, look at the patent right offered by the U.S. Trademark Office. Taiwan was ranking as number 3 or number 4 in the world. But in terms of per capita, the patent right per capita, Taiwan's ranking as number 3, only next to U.S. and Japan, and far above Germany, Israel, and other OECD countries. So in terms of the technology upgrading, Taiwan has to do a very, very decent job in this area.
And many people say that South Korea is one of the competitors, or the most important competitor Taiwan is facing in terms of, for instance, technology innovation and so on. So, and the U.S. just signed the so-called FTA with South Korea, and some people say that would be a very important negative impacts on Taiwan's economy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think my fellow economists at some of the think tank has already conducted this kind of research. Yes, it is true that Korean, as a competitor of Taiwan, which signed the free trade agreement with the U.S., which will significantly affect Taiwan's export performances. So this challenge will bring Taiwan that Taiwan will have to greatly enhance his production technology and greatly diversify his niche market.
Yeah, but as we know that Taiwan has been trying to negotiate the so-called FTA with the U.S. as well, but there are many difficulties. What do you think are the most difficult parts in terms of having an FTA between U.S. and Taiwan?
I think from economics point of view, it is mutually beneficial for the U.S. and Taiwan to have the FTA agreement. And I'm sure some of the U.S. congressmen whom I know that they do support this. I think the current issue is that the political relation between Taipei and Washington need to be further improved before the U.S. president can say, yes, we will sign the FTA.
So these are mainly political obstacles that we have to overcome.
Of course, all the economic problems can be resolved by itself, but the main problem is the political. The political problems, the U.S. Taipei relationships, and also Taiwan, mainland China's relationship. This is much more difficult, but that's beyond my area of expertise.
But let's put China into perspective, because I've heard that the reason why Taiwan so far has failed to get enough support in the U.S. business community for the FTA is that the top 100 companies in the U.S. dare not to stand out and support Taiwan because they are looking into the China market. So they dare not to put their interest in jeopardy if they stand up and forcefully support Taiwan. Do you think that's the case?
Yes, to some extent you are right, Professor Lo. In the past, whenever the Taiwanese American community tried to persuade the U.S. Congress to support Taiwan, they were very, very happy to support Taiwan. But however, if there's some other policy issues which may offend China, now the U.S. congressmen are much more reserved and much restrict. In a sense, it's because China today has a greater impact than China was. And also, China has more leverage in terms of the foreign exchange reserve and in terms of the foreign direct investment. China today makes some foreign direct investment in the U.S. as a vehicle or as an instrument to win the friendships. All right.
That's right. So what can we do, from Taiwan's perspective?
I think, probably, that the Taiwanese company would have to penetrate into the U.S. industry by providing and nurturing more grassroots support. Grassroots support from the labor. Basically, I'm very optimistic between the relationship between Taipei and Washington. Basically, it's because of two democratic countries. Culturally speaking, U.S. is much in favor of a democratic Taiwan rather than a dictator, authoritarian China. However, because of the strategic interest and because of the economic leverage, that the U.S. now is a little bit more reserved, reserved in terms of supporting Taiwan. But if Taiwan will be able to, penetrate into the American community economically, culturally, let American people realize that Taiwan is the real friend of the U.S. Then, the sense would be much easier to overcome.
But people from the American side have said that what's in it in this FTA for the U.S., Taiwan-U.S. FTA?
Yes, actually, the U.S. Trade Representative, they did conduct some, very sophisticated econometric analysis and come out to be positive. Actually, the economic benefit of a U.S.-Taiwan free trade agreement is much, much higher than the U.S.-Israel, U.S.-Jordan free trade agreement.
But they did sign FTAs.
Right. Jordan is maybe, is only a significant, portion of Taiwan's U.S. trade. But how come, we ask this question, how come U.S. signed the U.S.-Jordan free trade? Mainly it's because, for strategic interest, for some other non-economic factors.
That's right. And many people, including economists and also political scientists, point out that Taiwan has been too much dependent on the China market in terms of investment, international trade, and so on. So when we come back, we'll talk about how can Taiwan overcome these possible negative impacts and how can Taiwan diversify its investment and trading relationship with other countries. And so don't go away. We'll be right back.